Hi guys, welcome back on the channel. Today I'm very happy to have with me Andy Callan, author of Never Mind the Billhooks Rules. Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Um, Before we start the rules, I usually ask a question about, all of us, our wargaming background,
Yes,
how
okay.
we studied wargaming and all this. Can
Right.
you give me a short...
Okay, by my calculation, I have been a wargamer for 54 years. I started back in about 1968, went along to a local Wargames club, and been stuck with it ever since. I was looking this morning, and I found the first set of Wargames rules I ever wrote, which must have been 50, I think 54 years ago. It was the set of Napoleonic skirmish rules. It was handwritten with pencil, and there were only 3 copies because we used carbon paper. And this was before photocopiers were invented. So that shows how old I am and how long I've been doing this thing. So I've written dozens of sets of rules over the years. Some have been published in magazines. Mostly they've just been for my own pleasure or for my own group of friends. Billhooks is obviously the one that's taken off the most. I did have one a few years ago about the American War of Independence called Loose Files and American Scramble. That has had a shelf life. It's still being played about 25 years after it first came out. But Billhooks is the one that's really taken off. Much to my surprise, really, because it's a very simple game, really. There's some very simple mechanisms that I've taken from. There's a bit of me in there. There's a bit of H.G. Wells. There's a bit of Donald Featherstone in there. There's all sorts of things. There's a bit of the Two Fat Lardies in there. But it's a sort of cocktail of old tastes with some new additions in there, and it's come up with something new that just seems to work. So I'm very happy with it.
No, I like your rules. We're going to discuss about them. But what eras do you like? I mean, obviously you like medieval.
I've done everything in my time. I've done everything from ancient Egypt to Vietnam in my time. Increasingly, I'm principally pre-20th century, I would say. I do a lot of Napoleonic wargaming. I've done ancients. I flit around from one period to another, but Billhooks has been my main attention for the last couple of years, and it's eaten up hundreds of hours of my life. So
What about your collections? You have army collections?
I've got everything. Yeah, as I say, everything from ancient Egypt to Vietnam. So there's not much I haven't done in my time. Most of it has to be said, because that's how I started out. Was in 20mm plastics. I've got dozens of armies in 20mm plastics, because that was all you could get when we started out. Used to get Airfix figures from the local Woolworths. So I've got a lot in that scale, although the 28s are lovely, and it's a whole new technology.
Yeah, obviously. Why you chose Wars of the Roses for the rule book?
Okay, because it's set in a very. I use a classical dramatic analogy here. It combines the 3 dramatic unities of time, place, and action. It's set in a very particular time, in a very particular place, and it's just about battlefield combat. It's not about anything else, and it wasn't about any other periods. It wasn't about any other part of Europe. It was designed to be. This is going to recreate in my mind how I imagined the Wars of the Roses battle would be. And so all I have to worry about is a small number of troop types and very limited tactical options. The main thing was to get the character of the game correct. And that's what I've tried to bring out. Now, as soon as I brought it out, people would say, "Oh, why don't you use it for the Burgundian Wars, or why don't you use it for?" So the thing, it went against my better judgment, possibly, but I thought, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will, and they won't make as good a job of it. So I'll do it. And I've been fending off questions for the last 2 years about when are you going to bring it out, when are you going to bring it out. But anyway, eventually we've got there. And although I have used a team of people to do some of the other chapters, I have had an overall editorial control over what's gone into it. So all of the chapters follow a similar pattern, and the rules are laid out in a particular way. Now, each of the authors has a slightly different interpretation on things, but they're all within the spirit of the original set.
Yeah, no, I read the rules. You know, I did a review. These are from just
it's very thorough. I was a bit nervous when I saw you were going to interview, because I'd seen some of your other interviews, and you're very, very thorough. And I thought, oh, he's going to go through this with fine detail here. So
no, it's usually when I do rules reviews, and especially I do rules that I like, and especially your rules that I liked a lot. Sometimes, of course, when I do rules review, I don't explain all the rules because they have to buy the book. But it's good for people to know the philosophy and the mechanics. And if you see the comments below, there are quite a few of viewers that said, "I didn't know this. I want to buy the rules. I want to buy the rules." I like trying. You know, if you flick through only, you can see only the pages and the colors. That's he doesn't understand.
That's true.
Especially now, you know.
I was impressed that you focused in on the essentials of it very, very quickly, because you obviously know your stuff. You've read lots and lots of sets of rules, and I just wondered, do you play solo games, Nicholas?
I play solo game predominantly because obviously here in the Middle East there is no wargaming.
Of course.
And back in Greece there was some groups that it was difficult for me to go. It was in different places. I played a couple of games online with some friends from UK, a friend of mine, Ian. It was fun. But generally, I'll tell you something, Andy, I enjoy solo gaming. I stop, I have a coffee, I have my cigarette, I go up, I go down, I can leave it for the next day. I really enjoy solo gaming, and something I really enjoyed about your rules, they're very solo friendly.
Well, I think they are. Yeah, I've not seen them played solo. I could imagine they would be, because the card sequence brings up the surprise every time. You're not quite sure what's going to come up next.
Exactly.
And you can switch your identity with each new card drawn. So I think it would work quite well. Yeah.
No, it will. It does, because you don't know the sequence. You don't know which commander will order. You don't know if you will get a chance to order your troops.
Of course, that's right.
I think it's a very solo-friendly
game.
Good. What do you think? I mean, you wrote on your, and I have to be, you wrote on your cover. You say large skirmish games and small battles. But from my opinion, your game can easily accommodate big battles.
It can. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that there is a chap he calls himself Eric the Shed, and he's done every single battle of the Wars of the Roses using these rules. His battle of Towton had 1,500 figures on the table and 6 players, I think, and they work perfectly well. And if you haven't seen that blog already, I'll recommend it. I'll send you the details. So you can upgrade it very, very easily. And it surprised me how easily it upgraded, because I did write it as being a sort of 2-player, hour and a half, 100-figure aside sort of game. But it upgraded very, very easily. And you can do whatever you like. The reason I say big skirmish, small battles is because it's a game that doesn't have ground scales or figure scales or anything like, or time scales or anything like that. So mostly because I think any rules that attempt to do that don't really work. So really your 12 figures in a company can represent 12 men, or they can represent 120 men, or they may represent 500 men. It's up to you, really. It's, as long as the character of the game works in Wars of the Roses terms, or late medieval terms. I think it does. So, yeah.
No, yeah, it does. It works very well, and you captured and also the 100 Years' War. Okay, it is that I game 100 Years' War predominantly, and obviously the era is very close. After the 100 Years' War, you start the Wars of the Roses. But you capture very well that basically you have very few troops, 2 types: men at arms, spearmen, who basically are men at arms with pole arms, longbowmen, crossbowmen, some skirmish troops, mounted knights. That's it, and it's perfect. And also your movement is exactly, you don't have this complicated, but at the same time, like trigonometry moves, you know,
No,
that
exactly. No.
boring. If you have the speed and the distance to flank someone, you can do it. You don't have to check the first corner or the right corner or where is the edge.
No,
And
I hate rules like that, because they don't make for a pleasant gaming experience. You have to have a bit of flexibility, and of course the card sequence means it's impossible to come up with very complicated battle plans. They have to be pretty simple, and even they can go wrong, you know, very, very quickly if you don't get the card sequence. But that seems to be what happened. You know,
actually,
the thing is to create subtle effects using simple rules. That's what I'm trying to achieve.
No, it was perfect. I'm going to talk more about the rules and your philosophy, and because I reviewed the rules recently. At those battles, the 100 Years' War battles and Wars of the Roses battles, there was not much control. When the units were deployed, that was it. Maybe the unit of King Henry V was controlled, maybe the unit of Edward III was controlled, but the other units were not that controlled. And
that's right.
And also sometimes I read from historians of the time that the left flank had no clue what the right flank was doing. They had no idea if they won the battle. In the Battle of Crecy, for example, the English didn't know that they won the battle until the morning. So I think your rules, that's true. I think your rules, with this unpredictability and not knowing if you can move this unit or if the unit can support it portrays perfectly the era.
It has that effect. It has that effect. It works even better than I thought it was going to do, actually. So I'm very pleased with it. But especially in this period, people have said, "Oh, could we use it for later period?" I don't think you can, because they would have a proper chain of command then. The thing about this period is there wasn't a chain of command. There was, you know, the individual senior noblemen would do exactly what they wanted to do. They wouldn't pay attention to what the king or the earl or whatever said. They had their own interests and their own objectives within the battle. So that's how that works.
That's true, because even when the armies were assembled, every nobleman brought his own retinue. This retinue was following their nobleman. If the nobleman died, the retinues were basically out of control. The most of them were leaving. So your rules portray perfectly this. Give me some examples of your rules. I mean, I don't want to talk about this, but mechanics that you like, your philosophy behind them. I like, for example, the flank attack mechanics, where if you are attacked by a different ward, you have to make a morale test.
Well, that happened at the Battle of Barnet, of course, that the Earl of Oxford had won his side. He'd won his end of the battle, and he tried to return and join in the rest of it. And his friends thought they were attacking them, and they started shooting back at him. So these sort of things do happen. There was a bit of fog there, but anyway, I think that's just a little. It's a little bit of flavour for the period, really. I wouldn't apply it to periods other than the Wars of the Roses, because the Wars of the Roses were particularly beset with treachery on the battlefield. So treachery was always something people were suspecting, but probably not in other periods. But like I was going to say, people have asked me, could it be adapted for later periods? I don't think so, because of this chain of command thing. So I think it's important. It works for independently minded noblemen as commanders, rather than generals and their colonels and their other subordinates. So that's how it works. And
how did the second edition come up? I know you had the first edition where it was predominantly for Wars of the
Roses. It came out as a sort of color supplement with the magazine, and they were doing a few some videos. You may have seen some of the videos that they put out about how to play the game. And we were just having a chat before we started filming, and I just jokingly said, well, you know, if we did another Billhooks, we could look Billhooks Deluxe, you see, and we could add these extra periods in, and it sort of lit an idea in the editor's mind, and it's taken best part of 2 years to get there, but that's what it came from, really. And like I say earlier, people were very soon saying, can we extend this to other periods? I thought, well, I'd better do it rather than leaving it to other people. And that's how it came about.
And the mechanics, generally speaking, the mechanics with the cards and generally your whole philosophy, how you this is from previous games, is something that you like playing with cards. Just give me an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm prepared to take mechanisms from anybody, really. I mean, the roots of the card-driven sequence are with a game called Sharp Practice, which was a Napoleonic skirmish game produced by an outfit called the Two Fat Lardies about 10 years ago. But there are mechanisms in there, like I said earlier, that you can date to the 1960s and Double Featherstone. I mean, you mentioned the terrain setup, where somebody sets the terrain up and the other player chooses which side they come on. That goes straight back to H.G. Wells and Little Wars in 1913. So, you know, I'm happy to take mechanisms from anywhere if they work. I'm happy to use them. Like I say, I add something of myself into it, but there's very little in wargaming that's new, actually. I've been around for long enough to see ideas come up in all sorts of places. In fact, when the first edition of Billhooks came out, a couple of people said, "Oh, that's a bit like such and such," or "That's a bit like those rules." And I said, well, I'd have to say, well, that may be true, but I've never played or read those rules, so we're obviously coming from the same traditions or whatever.
Yeah.
But I like unpredictability. I like unpredictability, but not too much unpredictability in games. There's a lot of games where you have to roll dice to activate units. And that's fine, except the way that dice work, you often find that the same unit doesn't activate for one turn after another, and it gets very frustrating. In Billhooks, the last card drawn is not used. And that may happen a couple of times in succession, but it's unlikely to happen more than that. And that's just enough uncertainty to make it interesting without making it frustrating for the player. They have to feel they have some sort of input that's not completely out of their control, but not too much.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, no. Also, the rules have strategy. You have to plan ahead.
Yes,
that is very important. You know, in the medieval battles, deployment was 90% of the battle.
Key thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We had opposite you. I like that you included formations, support from the rear, or line formation. That's very nice.
Yes.
And something that I really like is the longbow fire that reduces their supply. This is excellent because in the end, in many rule sets, everybody's firing, and that doesn't make sense. You know
exactly.
what I mean?
They do tend to dominate the war games, and they just keep shooting and shooting and shooting forever, and it's not right. Now, I let them have full 6 arrow storms. Now, it doesn't mean they only had 6 arrows. It just means that they shot as many as they could, as quickly as they could, and then that's it. They're then relegated to sort of second line infantry. They have their uses, but really, they've done their part of the job. It's then over to the heavy infantry to take over.
Yeah, and that gives you also extra strategic options to think about when and who you're going to shoot. If you're going to waste your arrows to some skirmishers, or if you're going to wait for the stronger unit to come. And that's
I don't know if you subscribe to Wargames Illustrated or get the magazine in any way. There's a very good article in the December issue by a guy called Mike Peters, who lives in the UK, and I've met him. He's a very keen billhooker, and he's written a book about tactics in billhooks, and that's very good. He's saying things I hadn't worked out, but he's very good about it. So if you can get that magazine, it's well worth getting.
I will check it out. I will check it out for sure.
Yeah.
Tell me more. What else I like? I like a very innovative rule you have is when a formation is daunted, it breaks. Correct? Am I saying it correctly? It separates.
There's 3 stages really. There's everything's good. There's disarrayed, which means the ranks aren't very good, and then daunted means that they've suffered some sort of setback. They're a bit uncertain, and they really need a leader to come along and sort them out. And then, or if they're broken, that's usually a pretty sudden event. The daunted troops will sort of back off really most of the time, unless somebody comes along and rallies them. A break, when a unit breaks, it's usually as a result of something quite dramatic happening, either to them or to something near them. Yeah.
When you say in your rules that in the end phase, you can remove one disarray marker, so you can choose one and remove from one unit.
If the unit has not been otherwise activated during the turn, which sometimes happens, so they're stood around. If they haven't been given an order to do anything, but they can probably do enough to sort the ranks out again. It's usually when they've crossed some sort of obstacle and the commander has disappeared off into the distance and left them behind. They can just about sort themselves out. Or if they're archers, they can shoot once. They'll defend themselves. But that doesn't actually happen very often. Usually, because of the limited command radius, leaders keep their troops very close to them.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous to wander off and leave them behind, because if they're left behind, they won't do anything really. They'll just stand there. They're quite happy to let the commander go off and do the work. So that's why you really need to have a commander attached to every cavalry squadron, because otherwise they'll be out of command radius very, very quickly. Which also has the effect of making cavalry more expensive in points terms, which is realistic. Well, it's realistic for the Wars of the Roses. So I do allow, for example, in cavalry heavy armies, like in the French in the 100 Years' War, or the Crusaders in the Hussite Wars, that they're allowed to have more points because they need it to spend on the extra leaders that cavalry need.
Yeah, and I think you have also for the French a second rank of light cavalry supporting them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that was one of Simon McDowell's innovations, and yeah, that's fine by me. Yes, I think the half of the second rank count or something like that.
It makes sense because probably they were the retainers. The retainers
yes,
never
that's
had.
right. Yeah, that's right. The more lightly armored cavalry in the lance. Yeah.
So another thing I like very much is that you have melee reactions. I like them. You have charge reactions. That's one, and then you have a unit maybe fall back facing the enemy, but the enemy has the option as the commander to follow up. So basically a pushback. So
that's right.
I like this because it creates a nice dynamic to the battle.
Yeah, so cavalry of course always follow up because they
always, yeah. But I like very much your melee. I was not a fan of stationary melee as a gamer, but it didn't make sense to me. But the way you incorporated second and third melee with fatigue, this makes sense to me now. It doesn't bother me at all. For other rules, I was saying, okay, they're sitting and they're fighting and nothing is happening. But now, the way you incorporate the second and third, can you tell me about it? It really makes sense to me now. And I really enjoy that. I know that in the second round, I have worse die rolls and not so many options to reroll. And also, I know as a charger, if I don't manage to break my opponent, I bounce back.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the mechanics? I really like them.
It was sort of inspired by reading about cavalry, and particularly in the Burgundian Wars and the Italian Wars. They would charge in and try and break their opponents. If they didn't, there's no point hanging around waiting for their horses to get chopped up by men on foot. Pull back and have another go. I think at the Battle of Marignano in 1515, Francis I claimed that his gendarmes did 15 charges or something. I think they would have been very tired by the end of it. But this is just a simple mechanism that win quickly or pull back and try again.
Yeah. And
I do allow in a couple of the chapters the knights or gendarmes that have taken casualties, they can combine into a fresh formation. It's a bit of a disadvantage to it, but it means they can have another go with a full strength formation again by combining two damaged ones. They can't charge more than twice, but it gives them another go. And because they're very heavily armored, they can take a lot of damage really, unlike the infantry who can die like flies in the wrong circumstances.
Yeah. It's very obvious that you know well the medieval era. You've read, you know the warfare and everything.
Well, I've been reading about it on and off for 50 years, so
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, a lot we don't really know a lot about it. All of the modern history there's a lot of guesswork in there, because the chroniclers at the time didn't write about tactics because they weren't interested in them. They'd tell you who was at the battle. It was a bit like writing about a society party. They tell you who all the important people were there. They wouldn't tell you what happened. But, so we have to guess, and this is just my best guess at what I think might well have happened. I may well be wrong. So who knows?
Your information is great. I'll tell you two rules I was impressed, and I told you. I remember when we were chatting. First of all, I think it's the only rules that I know from the very few I've read that you take in consideration that the horses are vulnerable, and for shooting, and that was something that happened in the 100 Years' War. Why the longbow destroyed the mounted knights, not because of their armor, but because of the horses, that they were extremely vulnerable. So that's something you added in these rules.
Yes, just a simple mechanism, a bit more vulnerable. But once they're involved in melee, the horse is a weapon as much as the man. The horse is kicking around and knocking infantrymen over all over the place. So they're harder to kill in a melee. But when they're shot at, arrows do hurt them. I mean, there are pictures from the chronicles showing horses stuck full of arrows, and hasn't killed them, but it's made them completely unmanageable. So that's the effect. That's the effect of a hit on cavalry in billhooks. It doesn't necessarily mean they've been killed. It's just that they're no longer manageable. They're no longer useful. So that's as good as saying they're not there anymore. Yeah,
and then another very nice rule you added for the 100 Years' War, or your fellow authors, is that you're obliging, in a way, the high-quality units to attack high-quality units and ignore the longbowman or the low-quality units. This is, I have to say, we know this in historical history. We know that, for example, one of the reasons the French lost in Agincourt was because they all funneled towards the King Henry V, because they ignored the longbowman.
Yes.
It is a rule that I've never seen before, and I think it really gives this this extra thing that rules require.
Yeah, the whole thing is to create the right feel, the right character to the battle, and to make you behave like a medieval commander rather than a 21st century civilian.
Yeah,
because as a 21st century civilian, you say, "Oh well, the obvious thing to do is to get rid of all the archers and then turn on." But you have to have a little mechanism to make people behave in the way, and that's just a nudge to make them do it. Yeah.
Well, can we say a few things about briefly the mechanics, the sequence, how the game works? Starts from a phase that I was very impressed with, the maneuver phase.
Yes.
And then we mention it so the guys who can see can know the structure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, at the start of the game, you set up the terrain. One player sets up the terrain, the other one chooses which side of the table he's going to start off. So that means you're not going to have some completely impossible terrain set up, because nobody would fight a battle like that if it was like that. Then the side with the most light cavalry is deemed to have out-scouted the opposition. So the opposition has to put on more of their army first. Yeah. So they'll put on all their artillery and skirmishers, and then they'll put one of their wards on. Then the other player puts a ward down, and you alternate until both armies are set up. Then you go into the maneuver phase, which is each player alternates moving one unit or one formation. That could be a pair of a couple of infantry companies together, and that continues. You can either move a different unit each time, or you can keep moving one. So, for example, you could send out light cavalry, for example, on a wide outflanking maneuver. Now, that phase of the battle comes to an end. Immediately, somebody shoots, or immediately there is an attack made. And once that's done, you go into the normal card rooms. But that's just a quick way of getting into action. I've been in games, I've played games before where it takes an hour before the armies come into contact, because you're working through the same move mechanisms for the opening phases as you would for a later phase. So this is just a quick way in. Once you're in, you then switch to the card-driven turn sequence. So you draw cards from what's called the play deck, and that contains the leaders of both armies. Typically, you'll have 3 or 4 leaders aside, and so they can come up in any order you want. You could have, you can have 3 of your own side coming up in sequence, or you could, it could be very, very random. And always the last card in the deck is not used. Now, it might be one of the leaders, it might be one of the other cards, the bonus card, or the skirmisher card. But if it's a leader, that can be very frustrating, and that's just a little bit of frustration built in there, but not too much. So it's designed to be a game that's fun to play. So there's always something going on. You're not quite sure what's going to come up next, and it'll not be the sort of game which I have taken part in, where for turn after turn I can't do what I want to do, and nothing happens, and it's very, very frustrating. That has a certain amount of realism, but it's not fun. And the thing about the war game is it's a game. It's got to be an enjoyable experience, as well as producing a credible historical outcome, and that's what I'm trying to achieve with being Billhooks.
And then you have, depending on the cards you draw, you give orders for charging or for
shooting or maneuvering or whatever. Yeah. When the player's leader card is drawn, he can give orders to units, either a unit he's with, he's actually joined the unit, or a unit's within 6 inches. English wargamers are stuck with the imperial measurements, so you're probably used to this. It's the one area of life that we can still use imperial measurements, because everything else in the shops is in kilograms and the metric system. But we're stuck with inches because that's what we grew up with, and it seems to be one of the oddities of British wargaming, and American as well. But there you go. Yeah. So yes, and because of the limited command range, it encourages you to keep your troops tightly grouped, so they will operate in what we called wards or divisions. Typically there'd be 3 of those in an army, and that's just a way of making sure that that's what happens. You tend to keep them closely together. You might have a bit of cavalry wandering off to a flank somewhere under their own commander, but essentially the serious business is going to be in the center, clustered towards the center of the battlefield, with a limited range of control for each of the leaders. So that produces, again, a satisfactory historical feel to the game.
Yeah, it does. And in order to rally, you have to be with your troops, correct?
You do, yes. They won't just respond to an order. I say, you chaps over there, rally. You've got to go and join them and sort them out and get them moving again. It's a very personal style of leadership. You can't just give an order and expect it to be taken through the chain of command and they will operate on it, which is why I said I don't think the mechanisms are suitable for later periods where you have a more structured command system. It's and very much how do you win the battle? Well, you win the battle. There's the easy way. The easy way to win the battle is to kill the enemy commander in chief. Or to drive him off the table, which is what happened to me last week, actually, in a game I did. I was foolish enough to leave my commander too close to the baseline. He lost the melee and he went off, and that's it. So, the theory being that why would the rest of the army carry on fighting if the man who's brought them to the battlefield isn't there anymore? So that's the quick way. The slow way is a more attritional thing. You have army morale tokens. It's a simple mechanism. So for every infantry company or cavalry squadron you start with, your army starts with, you have a coin or token.
Yeah.
And every time one of your units is daunted, or you lose one of those tokens, and so you have to. So effectively, it means that once you've lost about half of your army, it's not precise. Once you lost about half of your army, that's it. The morale will collapse very quickly, and this happened a lot in the Wars of the Roses. They were the fighting could go on for quite a while, but then all of a sudden something would go wrong at one end of the line, and then progressively the whole army would collapse, and it would be all over very quickly, and it could swing very, very quickly. One army might think it was on top and winning the battle, then all of a sudden something would happen somewhere, and then it was all over very, very quickly. That happened in so many of the Wars of the Roses battles, and it definitely happens in in games of Billhooks. You're never sure that you've won until you've actually won, because things can go wrong very, very quickly. Yeah.
You have this rule about seeing your fellow troops breaking, and you have to take a morale test. So you may break from seeing your comrades fleeing.
Only if they are of equal or higher status than you.
Yeah.
So knights and men at arms aren't going to be bothered by seeing archers and billmen run away. They expect them to do that sort of thing. On the other hand, the archers and billmen will be very worried by seeing the noblemen run away, because why would they carry on fighting if the noblemen aren't doing it anymore? So that is one of those things that can cause a sort of cascading domino-like collapse of morale across the battlefield.
Yeah, that's very true. And what you said before, I mean, if I go back to my knowledge of the 100 Years' War, if you watch all the major pitched battles, the English won by killing not even 1/3 of the French army. The other was routed. So it was not like 11,000 dead out of 12,000 and battle finished. We're talking about 2,000-3,000.
Exactly. I mean, they were the important ones. Yeah. I mean, so for Agincourt, I mean, half the French army was never engaged, because it was the infantry and the crossbowmen. They just left them behind. And they just watched from a distance. And when all the noblemen were killed, they thought, well, that's it. I'm not staying here anymore. And they went home. So fair enough. Yeah.
You have a very innovative rule. Tell me about it, about dueling in your.
Oh yes, that's just a little bit of fun, really.
Yeah, I know, but it's fine. It's nice.
It's just a quick way. I mean, it's a high risk strategy. If you are losing the battle, one way of trying to pull it round is to send your commander in chief in against the other player's commander in chief. It's a high risk strategy, but if you've got nothing to lose, it's worth trying, because if the enemy player refuses the duel, then his troops have to take a morale test, because their leader is showing himself to be a coward. That's not the sort of thing you like to see. You like to have a strong leader showing you how to fight the battle. So that's just a simple little thing that goes in there. Most of the time, nothing much happens, because you have to win 2 out of 3 rounds to actually kill the other guy. But it's a little bit of fun that's chucked in there, and I've seen it used to turn a battle around before. It's been good. Yeah.
Sure, there's a strategy here. Let me explain. The commander doesn't go individually; it goes with his unit, obviously.
Yes.
And it's a strategy. When you're losing and you have nothing to lose, it's something that happened. They were trying to focus on the leader and kill him so they can rout the opposing army. It's not. It has historical accuracy. It happened.
And also having a leader with a unit means that they always add their own rating in hits to the fight. So when you're down to the 3rd round of a fight, and you're only fighting with a handful of figures, if you've got a leader with them, he's got guaranteed 2 hits. It's worth having him there. It's risky, because if he gets killed, which can happen, that could be game over. But they're leading from the front, and the leading from the front is expressed in this simple, additional hits mechanism. And again, it's producing what I think is a subtle result with a simple mechanism.
Yeah. You have a very nice, in my opinion, mechanism regarding the leaders getting, as I said, it's not written exactly, injured and weakened and reduce their quality.
Yes.
Can you tell me about it? It's very interesting.
Yeah, you have 3 classes of leader, and they have each leader card has 3 stars on it. The best you can be is a 3-star. That's a hero, which means he's very good at giving orders. He can give 3 orders, and he's very good at fighting. So he has 3 hits. Most commanders are going to be 2-star. They're okay. They can give a couple of orders. They can add 2 hits. Occasionally, you have one who we call a dolt, which is an idiot, or not very. A polite way would be to say he's not not very clever, but you know, it's a great use for a junior nobleman. You give him a squadron of cavalry, and he's just as good as anybody else on his own. But don't expect him to do anything too clever. And then, as they take wounds, they lose effectiveness. So a hero can take he'll take what first wound is okay, second wound he's not as effective, but he can still do something. Third wound that will kill him. But you only need one to kill a dolt or two to kill a normal commander. And again, it's a simple mechanism. They become less effective. Once they're wounded, they're not going to be as active in fighting or in giving orders. They will still be standing there with their standards, so the troops will still be able to see they're still alive, which is good, but they will be less active on the battlefield. And that's just a simple way of modeling that.
So there is a strategy here. Do you want your leaders in the thick of it, attacking and giving hits, or you want them a bit further back so you aren't going to lose? There is a strategy here, depending if you're aggressive.
Yeah, that's right. In the Wars of the Roses, they tended to lead from the front. That was what they did. As the period progressed, so once you get to the Italian Wars, that's pretty unusual. French used to do it a lot. The French lost a lot of commanders in the Italian Wars because they still used to put themselves at the head of their gendarmes and charge pikemen, which was not a good idea. But mostly the commanders then would just sit back and let the troops do the fighting. But as I say, putting a commander in with a unit in a fight is useful but risky. But it might be worth risking if you think that that's the only way you're going to save the day.
One more question to have. Can you tell us how the skirmishes work? I like the way you have them. They're not complicated.
Yes.
Many rules have very complicated rules. Skirmishes.
Yes.
Your rules are quite simple but effective.
Yes. The skirmishers are activated by their own card in the play deck. Each side has a card that says skirmishers and artillery. And when that comes up, you can do whatever you like with your skirmishers and artillery. They don't need orders. They don't need a leader near them to tell them what to do. They're assumed to be sufficiently intelligent to pick a good target, move to a good position, and make a nuisance of themselves. Because that's all they are. They're only a nuisance. They will do a little bit of damage. They're unlikely to be decisive. Losing them doesn't have any effect on your army morale. And they're very, very nervous troops. So in terms of the morale test, they only roll one dice. If they ever have to test morale because they've taken casualties or they've seen something bad happen somewhere else, they're highly likely to go. And they're also highly likely to affect other skirmishers nearby. So you don't want to have too many skirmishers close together because you could lose a lot of them if one lot goes very quickly. And in some of the other you don't need many. You never have too many of them. The numbers are limited. In the Wars of the Roses, I think it's 20 or 25% of your army can be skirmishers or artillery. That's all. So they're not going to be decisive, but they can just make a bit of a nuisance, and they're useful in the opening maneuver phase to sort of occupy bits of territory, bits of wood or something like that. So they do have their uses, and very occasionally they can be a nuisance, but they're not battle winners on their own. But they do provoke. They can provoke people into doing things. That's the thing. And
six per.
Six. So you only have to lose 3 of them, and they're going to start testing. The other thing about the artillery is
I want to ask
activated at the same time, and again, that's not a battle winner, but it can be very annoying. It's very unpredictable. It can do some damage, or it can just blow up because it wasn't very reliable in those days. But if you keep shooting at the same enemy, it's going to provoke him to do something. You won't just stand there. And it's a good way of making them cut. If they're on a hilltop, for example, a good way of getting them to do it is to send some skirmishers or artillery against them. And once they start taking casualties, they're not going to hang around too long. They'll decide we better come off and attack. And that's a good way of doing it. Provoke that reaction. Yeah.
You have remember if you score 3 1s or 2 1s, the artillery blows up.
That's 3 1s, it blows up. Yeah. It's about a 6% chance, I reckon, according to my assessment of the statistics. But it seems to happen far more often than that, just the way because of the vagaries of the dice. I get so many people write up battle reports and say the guns blew up on the first turn. Well, it's new technology. Don't trust it. Is the thing.
Now, in the end of the rule book, you have a very interesting painting guide, and
Yes.
can you tell me about it? It's really, I was reading it. I mean, I'm painting many years, and modeling guide, and it was really nice. Who wrote
He's
this?
very good. This is a guy called Richard Lloyd, who has done things for Wargames Illustrated Magazine before, and he was a very keen early adopter of the Billhooks rules, and he started posting on one of his websites about how to make these little markers for the arrows or for the daunted troops, and it seemed to be just an extra bit of it makes for a fuller package with the book. You've got a bit of interest about it, because wargaming is it's a craft hobby. It's as you get as much pleasure from building the armies and painting the armies as actually playing with it. It's an iceberg. Actually playing the game is the tip of the iceberg. Everything that goes before is unseen. But Richard's a very talented painter. He's certainly far better than anything I could even come close to, even with these old eyes. But yeah, it's very good, and I think it sets a benchmark, and people think, yeah, I should really try and up my game a bit. And so it's I think it's a useful part of the book. It's a bit of eye candy, that's all, but it's very nice. It's a nice part of it.
It helps. It helps also the terrain, and it's a specific. I'm sure it will help a lot of people, because painting a miniature is mechanics. It's not more only talent. Oh, it's mechanics. So it explains very well with stages what to do. Really good.
Yeah. It's a very particular style of painting, but it's very effective. I wish I could come close.
No. One question, I won't tell you that I was trying, because I have my 28 MMs back home. I will go back in Christmas and I will try. It is actually very easy to play the game. Because I'm asked from a lot of viewers of the channel with 15 MMs and smaller miniatures. It's very easy, no problem at all. Maybe you want to have half the distances, typical thing that we're doing, but it can be played with small miniatures as well, correct?
Played with any size, really. I mean, the key thing is to keep the relations roughly. So you don't have to have companies of 12 figures and remove casualties that way by taking individual figures off. You can just give each, you can have 20 or 30 or whatever you want in the unit, and just have a couple of dice at the back. Assume it's got 12 strength points rather than 12 casualties. And as long as you keep the rough relation between the frontage, so for example, so an infantry company has a particular frontage, and you can work out what that is and how many frontages of infantry you'll get for a long range longbow shot, for example. As long as you keep those ratios roughly the same, the game will work.
Yeah,
it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
And what is I'm missing, I'll tell you something before we close. I'm missing from the hobby campaign rules.
Yes.
It's something I discussed with friends of mine, and what do you think? Why there's no campaign rules anywhere with the rule books, or nobody's really interested in making?
Because I think I've been involved in Wargames campaigns in the past, and they all start with the best of intentions, but maintaining the interest and momentum in them is very difficult. They usually fizzle out after 2 or 3 moves. You can't keep a group of people consistently interested in this thing for long enough. There is a demand for these things, but in my experience, they don't work as a social activity. People lose interest quite quickly. What I have done in the past is, rather than do a campaign, I've done a series of linked battles. The people I've done most of my wargaming with, I was at university with, a long time ago, and we used to meet up once or twice a year. And so, for example, we did in the 1990s, we did all of Garibaldi's battles in Italy, and it took us about 2 years to work through them. And that, you know, so if one side won one battle, you'd move on to the next one, and it wasn't an actual campaign. It was just a themed, linked series of battles, and that seemed to work. But people obviously have an interest in doing campaigns, and I would say if you're going to do it, probably if you can find a board game that you can adapt, that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, you're right.
And if everybody's got a copy of the board, like Kingmaker or something like that, that's the easiest way. Once you start getting involved in maps and things, it gets very complicated. Even, you know, I used to do map games when the only way of communicating was through the post. You think it'd be a lot easier these days, but again, it's difficult to maintain the interest, and I think that's why they're probably less popular than perhaps they should be. But I see the war game is a social activity, and it's like most hobbies that men are involved in. It's the company, it's the talking to your friends. That's the most important thing. The war game is an excuse to get together as a group. Yeah. You share an interest, but the game itself is a social activity, and that's why I've tried to make Billhooks an enjoyable game rather than a rather dull but possibly more realistic game. So yeah, it's an entertainment. I think it's a caricature of medieval warfare, but it's rooted in reality. I think that's the thing. I wouldn't claim it to be a simulation. It's just an entertainment, but it seems to produce credible results, and that's a satisfactory outcome as far as I'm concerned.
No, for sure. What's the future? I mean, you have anything? I mean, obviously, this new deluxe edition is complete rule set. Anything planned for the future? Anything you have in?
I've been rather overwhelmed with this Billhooks thing for 2 years now, so I've been stuck in the late medieval period. So something will come along, one of the to interest me. I don't know what it is yet, but when it does, I'll let you know. But for the time being, I'm a bit stuck with all my Billhooks periods. There's going to be things coming up on Facebook and reviews like your own and others. It's going to keep me busy for a good while yet. So, but eventually something will come along. I think, let's try and follow that up. It may not lead to anything published. It may just be something I do, with this little group of friends. But who knows? I did have, as I say, I had a set of rules published in Wargames Illustrated #1 back in about 1987. I had one in number 300. I had Billhooks originally in 394, I think it is. They're up to about 420 now. I'm hoping to still be around for number 500. So I'm going to probably I'll start working on my game for number 500, and that would be an ambition of
mine. Remind me, you told me in one of the, before we close, in one of the magazines of one of the editions of Wargames Illustrated, there is a very good article regarding Billhooks strategy.
Yes, it's the next one. It's coming out in December. This is December 2022 edition, and that's one to look out for.
Tell us about it just a bit. What includes?
I haven't got it in front of me. There's my own designer note. There's my own designer notes on how I designed Billhooks, and describing what the book's all about. There's a scenario from the Italian Wars that I wrote using that chapter. There's something about modelling, and as I say, there's a very nice article on Billhooks Tactics by a chap called Mike Peters, and the magazine's worth getting it for that. In my estimation, he's done a very good job, and he's very perceptive about my game. He understands things about it I hadn't realised were in there somehow. That he's got a better feel for it than I have in many ways. So it's well worth getting. Issue December 2022. Get it.
I will get. The magazine comes in PDF or only in hard copy. This
you can get it. You can get it in PDF. But I don't know if you can get it by. You have to subscribe.
Yeah, we'll subscribe.
What's the post like out to Saudi? Because I could send you one, but I don't know what the post is going to be like getting to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, we will sort of, if it comes, we can discuss. And then last thing, I wanted to ask you, and there is a Billhook Facebook page. The guys can join, and you answer questions, talk about the rules, the photographs. So I will put it in the description below when I post the video.
Yes, do. Yeah.
Anything in Billhooks is mostly on the downloads and the cards and the tokens in Wargames Illustrated.
Everything you can download the cards and the tokens for free from Wargames Illustrated. The book is available either as hard copy or as a PDF. You can also, there are MDF tokens and professionally produced cards that you can buy, but you can just download them and laminate them and make your own. So we thought that was the best way to go, because people don't want to invest too much into a new game. So you can download the essentials, and then if you want to move on to the better stuff, that's the next stage in the game. Yeah,
I've done the same thing. Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Okay. I have to say, I really enjoy the rules. I will, hopefully when I go back home, I will use my 28s, but now I'm using my 15s.
Good. Well, if you do, post some pictures. That would be very interesting.
I will. But when I go back, I will shoot a proper battle report. So I will have.
Okay. Good luck. And if you have any questions, you know how to get in touch.
Yeah. I will bother you. I will bother you too much. Don't worry.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope have a look at the rules. They are really exceptional. Just trust me. I'm a rule buff. They're enjoyable. They're quick, and they portray, especially the 100 Years' War, because recently there is a surge on 100 Years' War. I don't know. Maybe my channel helped a bit. So many rules are coming out with 100 Years' War. This is an exceptional rule set that you will enjoy too much, and it has a lot of 100 Years' War details. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Andy, thank you again. And bye-bye.